Don't get caught up in scams or scandals. That's the topic this week of the program. We're going to talk about the case of James McDonald, former CNBC analyst who, did some things he shouldn't be doing, and hopefully give you some pointers and some things to think about in your own financial journey right here on Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts.
Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist Phil Putney. Now let's get rolling with today's show.
Hey gang, welcome into the podcast. Thanks for hanging out with Phil and I as we talk investing, finance, and retirement here on the show. We're going to talk about this case, avoiding scandal, I guess is the topic of conversation. This James McDonald who, bilked some people out of a lot of money and, kind of started going down a rabbit hole and got kind of further into the weeds and started making things even worse, as they typically do. A little bit different than like the Bernie Madoff thing, but still some similarities. And we'll share a link to the article in there if you'd like to check it out in detail for yourself. But really, Phil, I kind of just want to talk with you about, how people kind of feel about the industry, or how they feel about, could this happen to me? And those things, it's that bad apple syndrome.
Yeah. So, the reality of it, if you dig into it, because I read the full article on it, is, so he lost 30-40 million. He made some bad bets. Basically, he bet against the stock market at the end of the 2020 election, because everyone was thinking, oh, it's going to be the market's going to go down. Well, it didn't. And when he took what's called an inverse position in that, betting against the market, when it goes up and you're betting against it, you lose big. So he lost big. And that's not the scandal, right? That's not the problem. The problem with this is that he then fabricated statements to raise more money from other investors, claiming that he's going to do this mutual fund and do, these other things, and, gave them false information to lure them into his investment. And he even took some of that money, and it goes in there and talks about him, spending it on rent for his house. And then I think he bought a car with it and bought a bunch of expensive clothes. So used a lot of it for personal benefit, just not good stuff, But I think that the thing that kind of catches me with this is that, well, he was a CNBC analyst, right? So everyone looks at that as like, oh, well, this guy's, he's been on CNBC. He's an analyst. He's a good guy. He's got to know what's going on. So he's got a strong in right there, or can draw a lot of confidence from people, when he starts these companies, because of that history and that credibility, right? Which there's nothing wrong with that. I play on my credibility as a CPA, not playing it. It's the reality. I'm a CPA. That's my background, my knowledge, but I'm not using that in nefarious ways like this individual unfortunately did.
And if you're working with someone who's duly licensed, working both sides of things, right? They can do equities, they can do insurance. Phil, in your case, you're a CPA as well, right? So not only are you thinking about things from an investment and retirement portfolio stance, but you're also thinking about things from a tax, stance as well, which is good. Not all advisors do that, and that's totally fine. But again, know what it is that you're looking for and working with.
Yeah. And so the interesting thing to me on this case, and the reason I thought it was a good topic to talk about on the podcast, is not this question directly, but I get questions similar to this all the time from prospective clients. It's like, well, how can I trust you? How do I know you're not going to run away and do this type of stuff with my money?
Obviously, for every Bernie Madoff, right?
How do I know you're not Bernie Madoff, right? So one of those, which is basically kind of what this is again. And there's one common theme that you'll find in most of these fraud type cases, and it's in this one too. It was in Madoff. Is he, the advisor or his companies, made the statements. They produced the investment statement. So the statements they were sending out to their investors was something that they generated in-house. Right. So, they can put whatever they want on there, and that's what he did. That's how he was able to attract some new investors in after he had these phenomenal losses, is he was fabricating and making things up and putting them on statements, and people are looking at it, it's like, oh yeah, I want to do that. He's a CNBC analyst using, that clout that he has there. So yeah, it's similar to like the Madoff scenario. Well, how are we different? How am I as an advisor today? As an RIA, a registered investment advisory firm, in my agreement, it specifically states I am not a custodian. I am not holding on to your money. That's where the custodians come into play. So Charles Schwab, Fidelity are kind of the two big names out there, right? So we use Charles Schwab, and with them, and that's what I tell clients, how do you know I'm not going to do that? I can't, right? I don't have access to that money. It is held at Schwab in your name. They're your custodian. You will get statements directly from Schwab. You can log into Schwab whenever you want and see what's going on. The access I, as your advisor, have to that account is a couple of different things. Number one, to trade the account based on the investment strategies that we've selected for your scenario, to charge advisory fees that we've agreed on, and to make distributions, but those are distributed, and it specifically states to you, right? So there's where you set up a what they call money link at Schwab, where I'm able to take money out of the account and direct deposit it into your checking account. But that's the only thing we can do. Beyond that, I can't go in and, to this point, pay my mortgage and, buy a car, do all this crazy stuff that this individual has done and just give you a fictitious statement that says, well, here's what happened. And that's not the reality, because you see what happened on that statement.
Well, Phil, you kind of answered my question, but what kind of impact does this have on the industry? I mean, obviously people feel like, oh no, again, this could happen to me, or can this happen to me, or I don't want this to happen to me.
Yes. I mean, it's the old adage, the one bad apple in the bushel kind of spoils the whole thing. Well, this exactly what happens here. I mean, it's a black eye on the industry. Unfortunately, this bad actor, and it's why a lot of the rules are in place, is to try to hedge against these bad actors like this. But I mean, that's the unfortunate side of the industry. Don't put everyone in that same pool, right? Understand. And that should be part of that discussion when you're working with an advisor is, well, what does your process look like? What are your licensing, right? Who's going to hold the money? How do I get access to it? Who do I get statements from?
Yeah, absolutely. Who else can I contact? I mean, so Phil, for people to think about, what are some steps they could take to hopefully, if they are feeling, off about a situation or want to get more clarity, or just what's some things for folks to think about?
Right. I mean, you can talk to the custodian. So, I mean, if there is a custodian involved, talk to them, ask them to explain things, the what's going on in there. If you have some questions on there and you don't want to, you think, your advisor might be doing something inappropriate, you can ask the custodian always to see what they think. I mean, ultimately you can go to the SEC, and force an investigation. Be careful with that. I mean, you don't want to, if it's not something truly wrong, you don't want to go down that path, because that, if it's nothing wrong and just some misunderstanding of something, I mean, that can create a huge problem for that advisor to try to explain and go through that whole process. And when it was nothing wrong, right? We're not physically custodying or holding on to these assets. Those are held at a third party, a custodian. And that's really the preventative measure that we take to make sure that happens. I don't want to touch the money, right? I say, don't, it's not my responsibility. I don't want that on my plate. We're going to manage it and help show how it should be invested and manage the investments and manage the distributions and all the different things that need to take place, Roth conversions, everything that happens there. But the actual physical custodying of the assets, you need to have that at a third-party custodian. Just make sure that, the statements you're getting are real, right? They're coming from a third party source, and if a lot of things, with these cases too, if you look at it at the end of the day, if it sounds too good to be true, step back and really question it. I mean, that was Madoff, right? I mean, some of the numbers he was showing based on what's happening in markets. If it sounds too good to be true, then really start to dig into it, because no matter what somebody tells you, no one has the silver bullet that can avoid all the market downturns, get all this upside. I mean, it just doesn't happen, right? Yeah, there are ways to hedge against market downside, but if you're in the market, you're going to have volatility. At some point, even a more conservative investment is going to be down. It might not be down 20, 30%. It might be down 4 or 5%, but it's going to be down. So just have that understanding.
And you got to have your radar on, folks. I mean, Phil, we were just talking about the S&P last week. It was 17% we were talking about, or something like that it was up. And if someone's telling you they've got this investment vehicle at 35% or whatever, you got to have your red flag syndrome popping up there. Something doesn't stir the Kool-Aid, right?
Right. How are you getting that kind of return without, what's the risk? Because to have that kind of a level of return, there has to be some kind of risk, right? So, I mean, if they're telling you that and looking back historically and saying, oh yeah, but we've never been down. Well, okay, hold on, because I don't know where that exists. And I always joke with clients, it's like, look, if I had that, you wouldn't be able to get an appointment with me for like 3 years because they'd be lined up out the door. Because that just doesn't exist, right? I mean, that's everyone wants that. If I had that, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I'd be on an island someplace. Why would I be working with? It doesn't exist. So if it's way too good to be true, start to just step back and say, what is going on?
Yeah, I always thought that was weird. Like, think about falling for any golden ticket, the Willy Wonka golden ticket, whatever, maybe that's not the best analogy, but falling for anything, the money tree in the backyard. Like, if you had one, if such a thing existed, why would you share that with other people? Most people really wouldn't, right? So, advisors that claim they have the magic bullet to fix everything, and they're not living their own private life on an island someplace that they own, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Again, red flag, right? You got to have that gut feeling and gut check on certain things.
The Tax Smart Retiree is your comprehensive guide to mastering tax efficiency for a flourishing retirement. You will find indispensable advice and actionable strategies designed to enhance tax savings, maximize Social Security benefits, protect against market volatility, and develop a customized retirement plan. To get your free ebook, click the link in the show notes of today's episode and download your copy of The Tax Smart Retiree right now.
Thanks for hanging out with us, folks. We always appreciate your time on Phil's Tax Hacks and other retirement facts. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Hit the little subscribe button on whatever app and ring the notification bell to catch new episodes, all that good jazz. And we'll see you next time. Of course, if you need help, please reach out to a qualified professional before you take any action. Like Phil, you can find all the information in the show note descriptions, and we will catch you next time here on the program.
Phil?
Investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management. The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and/or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.